Hi, it's Kiffin Lobates here, and a couple of days ago, Crispin Courtney pointed, well, not just me, but everybody on LinkedIn who reads his posts, at a Motherboard article discussing the freezing of NFTs that have been bought by people, the NFTs having been minted by someone going by the name of Razzle Khan. And Razzle Khan turns out to be Heather Morgan, who is a woman who's been arrested in connection with the Bitfinex theft of about 4.5 billion, I think the Bitcoin is now worth. And my first take when I read it was, well, no, you can't seize people's NFTs. That's kind of the whole point of non-fungible tokens on a blockchain, is that you are the owner and they are your possessions. And it would take somebody getting hold of your private key before they could take them off you. The worst that could possibly happen is that the metadata or the image that the NFT points at is on a private server rather than on the interplanetary file system, and therefore that server could go down or refuse to serve up the metadata and the image associated with your NFT, and that way you have something on a blockchain that's pointing to nothing. But today I thought I'd actually look into it a bit deeper, and to my horror I found out that there's actually quite a bit more going on there. Namely, these tokens made by Heather Morgan were minted on OpenSea using OpenSea's OpenSea shared storefront contract. And the funny thing about that contract is that OpenSea doesn't put the source code out on things like Etherscan so that it can be verified. Now, it's hard enough if you're not code literate to understand what an NFT contract that has been published does without actually also having to go and decompile bytecode that has been put on the blockchain and trawling through what effectively amounts to assembly code and assumptions by the decompiler in order to work out what is really going on. And quite frankly, I don't have time to do that. I barely have time to look at the contracts that I want to interact with and go on reputation as much as I do on the actual source code. Probably about a 50-50 split, in fact. And OpenSea is a big player in this space, so you would assume that you could trust the code that they're using to instantiate NFTs for you. And the OpenSea shared storefront contract is provided by them as a way for artists and creatives who are not code literate to be able to mint their NFTs nonetheless. But the problem is, if the code is not revealed, then you can't actually see what is really going on. And if you cast your mind back to March or so last year, there was this anonymous person called Monsieur Person who introduced the world to sleep minting, whereby you create an NFT contract, mint NFTs into the addresses of famous artists, and the contract contains a backdoor that allows its deployer to seize back NFTs. And of course, you would never want to buy NFTs of a contract that had a backdoor like that. Now, I haven't been able to go through the code that OpenSea provides, and it's possible that all they did was refuse to serve up metadata related to the NFTs for this contract. But of course, it's equally possible that the OpenSea shared storefront contract contains a kill switch or a pause button, or possibly even code that allows them to take back NFTs that are minted with it. We don't know, because the source code is not freely available. And that is an alarm bell and very, very suspicious, because it means that there is the possibility that what OpenSea has basically done is take the concept of an NFT, and the particular contract that I keep talking about has the interface of an ERC1155 token, so it looks like an NFT contract when you interact with it. The fact is, it's quite possible that they've taken that and effectively turned it into a private database for OpenSea. And nobody in their right mind would go and spend hundreds and thousands of dollars or millions of dollars on something that they thought was NFT-like, but knew was really being run in a private database running on a corporation server, completely under their control, with no form of redress other than possibly suing them in court at great cost. And in particular, of course, if you're an individual starving artist, you're not going to want to go to court against a company that's received nearly $500 million in funding, because you're probably going to lose. That's kind of how the law seems to work in the US. The richer party has a much better shot at succeeding than the poorer party. So, to be honest, I'm not really surprised. OpenSea's track record so far is absolutely dismal. They are gearing up, as far as I can tell, to make themselves the most disliked and most distrusted company in the blockchain space, with the way that they have been handling things over the last year or so. I don't know why they've gone this route. I mean, from what I can tell, it was initially just a couple of guys playing around with a project and seeing if it would go somewhere. So at that point, I was kind of rooting for them. But with the way things are going now, it's really, really bad. Anyway, so yes, the answer there probably works out to be those people who bought NFTs that have been minted by Heather Morgan have missed out. And the reason why they've missed out is because they didn't really buy NFTs. They bought things that pretended to be NFTs, but really underneath it, when you look into it, they're not. And you would expect that the major storefront in the tech space for NFTs would have a bit more integrity and a bit more openness and transparency about their operations, so that this kind of thing doesn't happen. And you would think they would have a greater awareness of public relations to not jeopardize their position by acting like yet another controlling centralized tech giant, of which we have plenty controlling the technology space already. So that's the video for today. Sorry that I commented on Crispin's post without thoroughly investigating, but I have followed up now, and hopefully this has been interesting and shed some light on the situation. I'll see you all in the next video soon. Bye for now.